My name is Serge Torka, and we're building great schools for poor kids, and we're doing it profitably. This is Season 1, Episode 4 of Let's Build a Startup. Quick recap. Today, teachers spend about 80% of their time doing either lecturing or marking. That leaves very little time for one-on-one time between the teacher and the student, and we think that one-on-one time is one of the most effective ways for kids to learn. So to free up the teacher's time so they can do more one-on-ones, we're building a completely digital curriculum that replaces all that marking and lecturing that they have to do. In this episode, we're going to be building a prototype of our curriculum so that we can test any assumptions that we might have. Our goal with the prototype is to make it very cheap, so we want to spend on the order of tens of hours, not thousands of hours. And the other thing we want to use the prototype for is as a tool for capturing the imagination of investors, parents, teachers, anybody that we want to have on board to help us build these schools. We want to solve enough of the problem where any of the missing details can be very easily imagined. Before we jump into our own prototype, let's take a look at a strong competitor and see how they do things. So Khan Academy is a website that's trying to do something very similar to what we're trying to do. They're building a digital curriculum. However, they're not trying to build the schools themselves. It's up to each individual school whether they adopt their methodology. And so let's take a look at counting. So counting is a very basic skill, and we expect pretty much every child, as soon as they've learned how to speak, they should be able to start learning how to count. And let's take a look at their exercises here. Right away, we see a problem that says, put 4 bananas in the box. The issue here is that when kids are learning how to count, they don't yet know how to read, so they can't even understand the instruction. This should obviously be a verbal instruction that speaks to the child. The other problem is, even if that was made verbal, the exercise itself is designed incorrectly because it requires you to do this. You have to click and drag the bananas into the box. And I don't know how many of you have actually put a 2-year-old in front of a computer, but they have nowhere near the fine motor skills to be able to do this effectively. So this exercise is not actually measuring whether they know how to count, it's measuring whether they know how to use a mouse. A better way to do this would be either to allow the child to speak verbally to answer, or if we have this $70 laptop on Amazon that comes with a touch screen, they can touch the number so they can count how many bananas and touch the correct answer. This is just one example of how their lessons targeted at early childhood education are not quite designed correctly. Now, they do have something called Khan Academy Kids, which is specifically designed for very young children, and it's a mobile app that basically plays a bunch of videos and does interactive games with them to teach them some of these basic skills. Unfortunately, when I tried it with my kids, they get bored of it very quickly, and the videos are kind of random. You can't keep track throughout the curriculum to see where your child is at. Another problem with Khan Academy is they used to have this thing called the Knowledge Map, which was a really useful tool because it showed you everything that was available on Khan Academy and your progress. So the blue is things that you've already completed, green is what's available to learn next given everything that you've already learned, and gray is unavailable because you didn't meet some requirement. And for some reason they took this down. This was an incredibly useful tool because it gave you a knowledge frontier of where you were with your learning. And we're basically going to recreate this exactly because it was so useful. And it's a little disappointing that the way that Khan Academy is built and licensed makes it possible for things to get worse. Our curriculum is going to be completely open so that if we ever make a bad decision in the future that customers don't agree with, they can always go back to an earlier version and have it work exactly the same way as it did before. So we're starting first with the knowledge map. And our plan is to just declare each lesson and its dependencies, if there are any, like this, and they're going to show up like this. And so far, so good. Everything works. And you can see we start off with very simple lessons. So first we repeat open sounds. These are things that you're teaching like a baby. And eventually, after they learn to repeat their sounds, they repeat their letters. Oh no! So we ran into a problem. So our goal was to declare each of the lessons and their dependencies in this file, and then automatically draw the knowledge map from there. But we can see that, to get this algorithm working well, it's going to require a lot more effort than what we've put in so far. And so I don't really want to spend that effort. And even if we get the algorithm working correctly, there are still going to be cases where we want to either group things or spatially arrange them in some way. And this is not going to allow us to do that. So instead, we're going to scrap this idea of automatically positioning it, and we're going to manually position each lesson where we want it to be. Okay, so we implemented manual positioning, so you can grab a lesson and just move it wherever you want. Now, there's still lots of janky things about this, but that's okay. It's just a prototype. So, for example, you can take this and just move it in the wrong order, but we're not going to do that because we're going to manually arrange it to be correct. This ugly red sidebar thing, there's a lot of things wrong with this. You can have the line go over. It doesn't really matter. This is going to be more than good enough. We ran into another problem where we need to move an entire section, and moving it one at a time is just, really tedious. And so now we have a way to select multiple things so we can move them all at once. Ta-da! All right, so we have to solve one more problem with being able to position things. You can see that there are a bunch of modules below us, and sometimes we want to add a module right in between two things or right above, and it would be really annoying if we had to select our entire knowledge map. You can see it's pretty big. So it'd be really annoying if you have to select the entire knowledge map to be able to just insert one above. And so what we did is you can now select something and just click Move Tree Down. And that will just move everything that's required to down in order to let that thing fit. And then you can move that up. You can basically make space much easier without having to select entire huge chunks of the knowledge map. And this is a good time to just go over what we've built in the knowledge map so far. So you can see it's gotten pretty big. There's about 200 or 300 different little lessons. And this looks way more intimidating than it actually is. If we zoom in on this, you can see there's like repeating sounds, repeating vowels, reading lowercase vowels, a lot of little lessons. This is the kind of young toddler section where you got to learn your opposites, learn colors, shapes, recognize before and after, things like that. Then we have math. So math I did go into a little bit more depth up to about grade 4 or 5. And then we went into the computer, so using a mouse, learning how to scroll, learning how to click, hover, things like that. Then we went into keyboards, so being able to, let me see if you can see that. So being able to peck keys on your keyboard and then going all the way into typing eventually. And then also reading and writing. And so learning how to trace letters with your fingers and then eventually with a stylus. And, eventually that'll go into entire words. All right, so we're going to stop here with the knowledge map. We will expand it as we need to going forward. But the idea is the editing of this knowledge map will only happen by kind of the admin of essentially either me or whoever is designing the curriculum, or maybe each school would be able to add some customization to their curriculum if necessary. But it's not something that we expect every teacher to modify. And so the fact that it looks a little complicated is not really a big issue here. And you can imagine this is going to look a lot nicer once it's a polished product. So we're going to get a designer to go over it, and we're not going to have these all caps, underscore, etc., this ugly red sidebar. Each module is just going to have a title, a description, the videos and the exercises associated. So it's just going to look a lot nicer. So next, we're going to work on actually implementing one of these lessons just to see what it looks like. All right, so we just finished our first exercise. It's to trace a line with your finger across the screen. So very simple. We're aiming this at toddlers between about 1.5 years and 2.5 years old. And the goal is to develop their fine motor skills and to get them comfortable interacting with a touch screen, because they're going to need to do that for follow-up exercises. So let's take a look at what that looks like.
Trace the line with your finger.
All right, so you can hear that there is a verbal instruction for what to do. So we're using an AI model to do text-to-speech on those instructions. And of course it doesn't work because I'm on the wrong computer. So let me switch over to my other one to show you. All right, so I have my microphone pointed at the tablet, so hopefully you can hear what it's doing. So the goal is to make a very tight feedback loop. So as soon as I touch the circle, it gives me a beep to indicate that I've grabbed it. And if I stray
Trace the line with your finger.
If I stray too far away from the circle, so you can see it's a little forgiving, but as soon as I stray out, it gives me feedback that I'm too far out. So I can only move the circle when I'm close enough to it. And so the idea is to encourage the kid to keep their finger on the line. And so you can see. And the same way, we want them to stop right at the end. We don't want them to go too far, because when they start drawing letters, they can't just go on forever.
Trace the line with your finger.
And so if you go too far past the end, it still fails.
Good job.
So we want them to let go at the right time.
Good job.
All right, so we finished a few more modules here. So after the child learns how to trace a line with their finger, now we go on to more complicated shapes. So we're going to do squiggles and shapes like squares, triangles, etc. So let's do squiggle first and see what that looks like.
Trace the line with your finger.
So the same as before, but now the shape is not just a simple line. It's a squiggle, and you can even, it can have weird curves. It can even make loops. All right, so here we have a bug. Uh-oh. That's not good. All right, so you get the idea. And now for these simple exercises, where you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again just to get good at it, the way the score works is you just got to get 10 in a row. So if you ever mess up, you say it goes back to -1.
Good job.
And then you start from 0 when you're done. So now after you've mastered squiggles and shapes, and actually you need to also master reading letters, after you've got all 3 of those, now you're ready to do tracing of capital letters. So let's take a look at what tracing capital letters looks like.
Trace the line with your finger.
So now you see there are more lines and it's less forgiving. You can see the circle is a lot smaller, and so here it's a lot less forgiving. So I have to stay closer to the line, and there are multiple lines together.
Good job. Good job.
All right, so you can see how we build up the curriculum one small skill at a time. Now let's talk about the score a little bit. Our goal is that a student shouldn't be able to get a perfect score unless it's overwhelmingly likely that they have mastery of the material. And so for simple exercises where you're doing the same thing over and over again, we just do a simple 10 times in a row and you're done. For more complicated exercises, people have tried to do all kinds of complicated things like AI or other fancy things. We don't need any of that. There's a really simple algorithm that my dad taught me. He actually used it on me when I was a kid to teach me math at a very young age. And it goes like this. Imagine a deck of cards where you have 5 of each variant. So in our case, we have 5 letters. So there's going to be 5 of each letter. So we have 25 cards in this deck. And we're going to deal them out. And those are the exercises that you're doing. So let's say a D is dealt out and you solve it correctly. And so it goes into the discard pile. Then an E is dealt out. You do it correctly. And so it goes into the discard pile. And then another D is dealt out. And if you do this one incorrectly, not only does this D go back into the shuffled pile, but this D also goes back into the shuffled pile. And so essentially, you're increasing the likelihood, whenever you get something wrong, the likelihood that that thing that you got wrong comes up again increases because now there's more of them in the deck than there are other cards. And this essentially reinforces naturally that you keep practicing the things that you're not quite understanding. So this is a really simple algorithm and just works really well. All right, so fast forward several weeks, and you can see that we've built out a lot more of the curriculum. So we've got all of our finger tracing for letters done, and we have a lot of keyboard stuff and mouse stuff, and a lot of concepts like before and after, and adding. So we've got a lot of stuff built now, and you can also see that I've implemented a progress tracker for my son. So the green is everything that he's completed, and the yellow is everything that he has access to given what he's completed. And you can see that on the writing and on the keyboard, he's actually doing pretty well, and on the mouse, so he's progressing pretty nicely. The one area of weakness is the concept of before and after. So he's not quite getting it, and I've tried multiple different ways of trying to teach it. And so, for example, with numbers and with just instructions, so do this after doing this, and he's not quite getting it. So I'm trying to read some books to see what techniques other people have, and then we're going to try to digitize that into here. Initially, I had one big lesson on before and after, and I've since split that up into multiple, much smaller lessons, like teaching before separately and after separately, but he's still not quite there. Like, he kind of understands the concept of after, but before he's really struggling with. For example, this is what recognize before looks like. Okay, so this is an example, and so you got to tap the apple, and then tap the mittens, and again, you can do this on a touch screen, and it's very high feedback, but you're just not quite getting it. Now we're just going to show some snippets of my son actually using this curriculum.
Press D.
You found it.
Press Q.
Very good.
Press F. Press C.
Uh-oh. Very good.
G.
All right, so at this point, my son got very excited and wanted to tell his grandparents about how well he was doing at the typing. So he goes and calls them.
Come! Come!
Press C.
And you can see that this keyboard interaction that I made is not quite done correctly for his age at least, because if he holds it down for too long, it'll actually register as multiple keystrokes. And after the first one, it'll give the buzzer sound. So we're going to go back and make it a little bit more forgiving in terms of letting their fingers sit on the key. And very shortly after encountering that interaction, he didn't want to play the game anymore. So it's really important to nail down all those moments where the system might behave in an unpredictable way, because their attention span is already limited, and every one of those that you have, it just cuts down the attention span even further. So really important to get those right. And we can flip it over like this.
Good job.
So you see that he's really happy and motivated when he gets one correctly without hitting the buzzer sound. And so we want to just enable as much of that as possible to keep their attention span going for as long as we can. Don't go too far. You got to let go. Once you draw the line, you got to let go. And another interaction problem here. So the previous version that my son played on, it would allow you to swipe all the way past. Like if there was a line and you hit the end, then it wouldn't care. You could swipe very far through the line and it would still accept it. And I noticed that his letters were just very sloppy. And so I made it less forgiving in that you have to stop right as the line ends. You have to lift your finger off at that point. Otherwise you get the buzzer sound. And you can see that he's not used to it and that he doesn't quite understand what's going on. So I think we need a different sound to make it obvious. Whenever he makes a mistake, it needs to be more distinguishable from other mistakes so that he knows which specific mistake he made. What letter is that?
A.
Don't touch the screen with your other fingers.
Trace.
Very nice. Very good.
Good job.
Yeah, is that so fun? You can't go too far. You got to stop right when the line ends.
Good job.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Trace the line with your finger.
Don't go too far. You got to stop when the line ends. And you can see here that he tries to complete the B, and it makes the sound that he's done, so he lifts his finger, but it's not done because you're supposed to do it without lifting your finger. So again, we just need to tune those sounds to be very precise so that interactions like this don't happen, because they're very frustrating for him.
Trace the line.
So with the B, you don't let go. You just keep going without letting go. Go all the way. You got to finish the letter.
Good
There you
job.
go. And we're just going to keep iterating on this, and especially as we get more kids playing with the curriculum, we'll really be able to iron out all the kinks.
Good job.
And we're going to do one more exercise with him where he's learning how to use a touchpad just to show off the versatility of this $70 laptop.
Good job. Good job. Good job.
I'm done this game.
You're done? All right, high five. That's it for this week's episode of Let's Build a Startup. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions or ideas for how we can make our curriculum better, please leave them down below. I do respond to every comment. And in the next episode, we're going to be crafting an investor pitch.